Welcome to the Geekery podcast, where you can have dungeons or dragons, but not both. I'm Void, and I'm here with my co-host Beej.
Oh, I want both, Mom.
No. Today we're talking about, well, something along those lines. We're talking about like tabletop RPGs, really. So Dungeons and Dragons plays a part, but we're going a little bit beyond that because you've been playing tabletop RPGs. We are going to talk a little bit about Dungeons and Dragons probably, but you've been playing Star Wars Edge of the Empire, and you talked about this a couple weeks ago that you were going to do it, and then the more that you talked about it, like with me just through text as you actually started playing again, the more I was like, we need to make this into an episode because I wanted to hear about it, but I was like, just save it for the show, which sometimes happens to us. We're like, we want to talk about stuff and we're like, no, let's talk about it a little bit on air. So yeah, I know in general what you've been doing and that you've been playing and that you've been having fun, but tell me about it.
This is the most unique RPG system that I've ever used. And I mean, I'm not hardcore into tabletop RPGs, but I'm the kind of nerd who reads rule books and wants to know what's out there and how they work, even though I don't have a set gaming group. And this is one of the most unique ones that I found because in general, tabletop RPGs are numbers based. They are, you go all the way back to the original Dungeons and Dragons and AD&D, and like second edition, which is Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, had THAC0, the to-hit armor class 0, where you had to do tons of math. I mean, third and fourth edition, even fifth now, you're adding modifiers. You're making dice rolls against different stats and different values with penalties and additions, and so there's a lot of math going on, and there's really not any in Star Wars Edge of the Empire. It's a Fantasy Flight game, and they took the idea of tabletop role-playing and actually wanted to emphasize the role-playing part of it. So the main aspect of this game is the narrative. That storytelling is at the forefront of this, and the dice and everything else are set. I don't want to say they're separate because they play a major part, but they are not the primary focus of this game. And it's called, I think they're called story dice is actually what they call them, because they're a special dice system that they all have different symbols on them. Have you seen them? Have you seen the Fantasy Flight dice that they use for this?
It's a very Fantasy Flight thing to do. They tend to do that for a lot of their games where they make custom dice, and depending on which game and which system you're playing it, and I'm talking about like board gaming and like tabletop gaming, not just tabletop RPGs, Fantasy Flight is just known for that like custom dice thing. So I know the system that exists in Edge of the Empire because I've listened to a little bit of like a live play of it. Like I listened to part of a season that somebody put out. So it sounded really interesting, but it's mostly just like you roll it and then you get a bunch of basically like story beats of kind of about what happens, right?
Yeah, kind of, because you roll them and there are basically three. I have a cheat sheet on this on my computer actually to tell you what they are, because the dice have to be interpreted because they're all symbols. And it's like you have all of these, you have 7 dice and they're all different colors. You have a yellow one, a green one, a blue one, a white one, a black one, a purple one, and a red one. And 3 of them are good and 3 of them are bad. 3 of them are based on the levels of success that you have, and the other is the levels of failure. And there are 3 degrees of success and failure, and the 7th is a force die that lets you see how many dark side or light side points you're using and getting on things. And so green dice are the base dice that you roll, the base die that you roll, and it's got the triumph symbol, which is essentially a critical success, and you have the advantage symbol, which is something good is happening to you, and then there's success. It's like you succeed at what you're doing. And the same things have a negative symbol as well. You have a despair, which is a critical failure. You have a threat, which means you may have succeeded at what you did, but something bad happened to you. And then there's just straight up failure. It's like, so if you were to roll to hack a computer, to slice a computer, and you rolled a success and a threat, that would be you hacked into the system, and got what you wanted, but an alarm got set off, so now the stormtroopers know that you're there. It's all based on, like, if you roll all of these, you may have 3 green dice that you roll and 1 purple die that you have to give it a negative. They'll cancel each other out. So if you have a triumph, it will cancel out a despair, so you neither have a critical success nor a critical failure on it. And it's just a really interesting way to do it, because it's all based around moving the story forward and things that will happen to your character that either the player or the GM will decide. That's one of the really cool things.
I was going to ask, is this one of them that it's more of like a negotiation between the players and GMs about like interpreting the dice, or is it one where like the players roll and the GM says this is what happens?
It depends. It depends on, at least for us and some of the ones that I've seen, we basically do it fluidly on based on what it is. Like, generally for us, we've played twice, and I GM'd the second time, and my friend Austin GM'd the first time. There are only 3 of us because we're doing this kind of as all of my friends live away from me, so we're doing this to hang out sometimes, and so we're doing it online. And so when he was doing it, it was our very first time. We hadn't even read the entire rule book yet, where every time we got like a threat or success, it came from him. He told us what happened. But the way that the rule book says is that that you can spend advantages and triumphs to do something, and generally that's where you start negotiating with the GM. It's like if you are starting a round of combat and you roll a triumph, or let's say you roll an advantage. That's the lesser one of them, that something good happens to you. It may be that your character thrives with cover and you are in a barren wasteland. If you have a success and an advantage, it's like, okay, my character is going to shoot the stormtrooper and then duck behind this 3-foot rock that happens to be beside me, and then shoot the stormtrooper. And that's the kind of thing that an advantage would get. It's that kind of Star Wars. They wanted it to have a feel of things just kind of work out for you in Star Wars. And so that's what they tried to do with the advantage and threat, to make it be like not punitive and not ridiculous, but the player has the option, depending on who the GM is and how much leeway they're going to give, on what level of success they have. I mean, the GM always has final say. You can't say, I roll an advantage and I shoot Darth Vader in half with my bowcaster. It's not something like that, even on a triumph. But it's really interesting, and we've been playing it so that generally the negatives come in from the GM, so that the players don't, take very minor things to them and not move the story along.
Right. So how do like the characters tie into the system? I guess that's part that I didn't really understand from like when I had looked into it. Like, do they have powers? Can they influence the dice with those powers? Like, how do classes tie in without getting like too far into the weeds of the actual mechanics behind it? Like, what gives each character their unique flavor?
Well, there are 3 different versions of this game. There's a Star Wars RPG, and then there's Edge of the Empire, which is kind of Outer Rim bounty hunters and scoundrels. There's Age of Rebellion, which is the military rebels alliance kind of stuff, and then there's Force and Destiny, which is the Jedi-centric, Force-centric I won't say expansions, but branch of the game, and they all play off of each other. Like, you can intermix them any way that you want. And so the characters that come from each of these have, I think there are 4 what are classes, but I can't remember what they're actually called now, careers. There are 4 careers that you choose from, like explorer or hired gun or smuggler or something like that. And then within those, you pick specializations. Like my friend Austin is an archaeologist, an explorer archaeologist, and I am an explorer big game hunter. My other friend is a Jedi Consular, a Jedi Mystic Seer. And so what those do is that every base class has skills like D&D where you get an extra dice or two, or upgrades the amount of dice that you can have based on the number of that you have in any rating. So if I have a higher charm, I get better positive dice, and then I can take talents, which are like feats in D&D 4. If you remember those, it's like taking talents that may remove a negative die from something, and maybe it lets you count a major action as a minor one, something like that.
Okay, yeah, no, that makes sense. So, like, with all of those mechanics in mind, like, how's it going? Because, like, the things that you were excited about, like, when you were texting me, were, like, the narrative and, like, what was going on with it, and the fact that you were really hyped to, like, get in and GM after the first session. Because you said that you weren't sure about it, but it sounded like Austin kind of wanted to try it. And then once you had played once, you guys kind of switched roles, and you were pretty hyped about getting into that GM role.
I like this system. I really, really do, because it gives a lot of leeway on the GM's part to wing it. And I say that in the best way, where like this last time, my players, these guys, they barely fought anything this last time, because the way that they were playing meant that with the dice rolls and the way it was approaching success and failure, and with these varying degrees, they got out of combat and still won those encounters, because experience isn't based on kills or what you do. There are a few landmarks and milestones, like in a pre-made adventure, where you might repair a ship, and the person who decides that they need to repair this part of it instead of just flying away gets 5 extra experience. But every adventure gets a set amount of XP at the end of it, so that you can upgrade your character, but you don't get it for individual things within it. So it makes the story moving around much easier and better. And I loved it that they went I want to say they went off the rails on this last one, but it was because things went so unbelievably well for them that I was so excited about this as a system. And when I started using it and started looking into it and reading, it was harder to GM than I thought it was going to be. But once we started moving along, it became very natural in a way that any D&D game I've had hasn't, where they're doing this, and then I'm like, okay, I'll just roll a threat die on this for my own sake, and how I'm going to approach the negatives and the storytelling and stuff like that. It was a lot of fun. Like, in the very end of the first adventure, they're in this mining town, and they have a compound at the end of it, like just on the outskirts, that this guy's come into the mining town. He's have all this like influence, and he's taken over, and he's got deals made with some of the nobility on Ryloth and on Geonosis, and the players don't know that at the time, but he does, and you need to drive him out of town. And so the point that you're trying to do is break into the compound. You're going to try to take out his Aqualish guards, and then you're going to eliminate him in some way. And you can do this even in the module. It has combative ways to do it, and suggestions and ways to handle it, and combative combat stats. And my guys did nothing that was in the book. So instead of, like, they got there, they were talking to this guy, and it was like, if they go out that day, read this to them and this happens. They stayed inside talking and doing stuff and shopping and messing around all day. They never went to this area. So as GM, I just let them. I didn't force that part on them. And then they went back, and because they were working toward taking him out based on the conversations with these NPCs, that was what was written. And so my friend, who was the archaeologist, he had spent a lot of his skills in long-range heavy weapons. He was like, okay, so I'm going to scout this place out. I'm going to scout the best area around the compound to be able to get clean shots, and we're going to get the Twi'leks here to run a distraction. They rolled really well, so the Twi'leks set up a distraction by setting a landing land speeder on fire that we all came in with, and running it down the street to explode. And Barry, my other friend, was going around and like meditating and doing his force thing, trying to figure out the best like mechanics and how to approach this and get a lay of the land and sense what was going on inside this cantina where they were holed up. All of their dice were just about perfect. Like all of these things, like they were getting triumphs and advantages and very little threat at all. Even negatives, like they were massively succeeding on this stuff. And so what happened, instead of being able to go talk to them and negotiate a deal or fighting them, what happened was that the triumph basically they had a triumph on the distraction when they set it out, and that meant that I interpreted that as being the guards ran looking for that and left most of the cantina empty. And so then the boss came out and kind of looked around. Like the triumph is like something that happens and it's great, like truly something great happens. And so the main boss, Drom, came out and stood looking out the door. And so Austin was on his perch at this point, and he rolled 2 triumphs when he shot at the boss and took his shot. 2 triumphs, and he rolled 3 successes on that as well, just the normal success icon, which his weapon said that if you roll 3 of this particular icon, that you get a critical injury against the person. So I rolled the dice on a D100 on critical injury, looked it up in the handbook, and they rolled for a cripple or maiming. And he shot the main guy's leg off at the knee, I told him, and knocked him down. He basically had 2 hit points left, 2 wound threshold is what they call it. And my friend Barry came up and finished him off with his... He didn't take out his lightsaber because they knew that I was going to call an Inquisitor on them if he kept using his friggin' force powers at this point in the universe. And they know that I'm enough of a jerk that I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it anyway. But they're expecting it now, and it's going to be great. But he killed him, and all of the enemies were gone, so they had enough time to loot the place, get all the credits, find everything, explore, complete the mission with enough time left to blow it up before and with another massive success roll with like 3 advantages, I think, on one of the rolls to ignite because of the skill that he was using. And so they made a crater out of the cantina, and everything was great. And it's like they had to take 1 shot, man. And even before that, the combat area before that, he actually succeeded on his mind trick force power that he had and shot off into a cave where bounty hunters were, made this Trandoshan fire into a cave and scare the monster that was in the back of it to kill the other 2 bounty hunters that were in there because of where they were all positioned. And it's just like, these guys are being jerks that in a D&D campaign the DM would have hated.
I don't know. And see, like, I like that a lot. So I've tried to listen to many, many different like live play games, and not so much streams, but I've tried like a lot of podcasts that I've subscribed to, and I usually don't make it through the first season of whatever. The only one that's stuck with me long term is the Adventure Zone. And I think one of the things I've taken away from it is that like the Adventure Zone is all about narrative, even though it's hung on D&D to start, and they've moved on to other systems since then.
Have they? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I'm much, much more interested in tabletop RPGs that allow for narrative. And I think that D&D 5, like the 5th edition, actually does a really good job, because I've heard it run multiple ways now. And there are people that will take it and they'll twist it more towards a 4 direction, where it's more about like the combat and the encounters, and like it's much more of that like traditional like fighting people encounter game. And I don't have an interest in that in my tabletop games, because I shouldn't say my tabletop games, in my tabletop RPGs, because like there are other games that do it better. If you want to just do combat, there are other board games that are out there. There are video games. There are things that are going to give you a better combat experience. Combat should just be like a tiny piece of the puzzle. it should really be more about like the overall narrative. So I've been thinking about that a lot lately, especially because I want to do more tabletop RPG stuff like with my kids.
Yeah.
And I know I've talked about that before. I basically made them a homebrew system that I didn't have a name for it, so I called it Imagination Adventure because they were younger and that made sense to them. And
that's not a bad title for a kid's RPG anyway. Put capital letters on that and you can sell it. Like, that kind of thing needs to exist. Let's kickstart that.
That's a lot of work that I don't have time for right now. But it was super simple. It was basically like I gave them each some dice, and then I would just set like random rolls that I knew were very accomplishable. None of it was too hard. None of it was about like the character that you had, even though I had them make characters, they had like very minor stats, but it wasn't about like, look at your character sheet, do math on it. It was very much like roll a die and like add one number, and I would just tell them what it was. And it was kind of Calvinball with it, but it was fun because we could just like tell the story. And now they're older to the point where like I want to get them involved with more of a system. And I've been looking at 5th edition, and I think I could make it work, and I think I could make it fun. My worry with it is that they're still young to the point where like I don't want them to have too much violence. And as a tangent, I'm probably more strict with violence than most parents because I actually know what is in things. Like, I pay attention to the shows they watch, like movies they watch, video games. Like, in a lot of ways, I am much less strict than other parents because like my kids have so much access to technology and screen time, and like they want a new game on an iPad and it's free. I'm like, whatever, I'll check it out and I'll let them have it. But in other ways, like they've never seen like a violent movie, and I don't have an intention to let them do that soon, and I don't make it into a big deal. It's just like they need to run stuff by me, and sometimes I say no, and then they move on with their day. But because of this, it's like they're young. Like, they don't need to know about like in-depth violence yet. And D&D, a lot of it comes down to like that violent conflict, no matter what, just because of the nature of the world. So I've been looking at other systems, and this is one of the reasons that I wanted to talk about Edge of the Empire, because it's another system that I could probably make narrative for them. So my hesitation with going in the Star Wars direction is that they just don't have enough context for Star Wars. Like, when you know the movies, and like you and I have played so many video games and read so many books and comics, and like you and I just know the Star Wars universe, and a lot of other people our age are in that same place. My kids don't have that. Like, they've seen The Force Awakens, and that's it, basically.
Okay, so I have 2 things to say about this. And on that particular point, for your kids, what I would suggest, and I'm totally new to this, don't get me wrong. I don't know what's in all of the modules and source books and all that stuff, but they do have a Force Awakens beginner game with pre-generated characters that takes place on an adventure on Jakku, and that is standalone entirely. It can be played with all the rest of it, but it does not have any other source books. It doesn't have any other classes. It is entirely contained within that. So if all they've seen is The Force Awakens and that's what they like and know, this is the area of this game that you may want to start with and look into.
That's super cool. Yeah, no, I need to take a look at that.
That would be great. And also, on that line of, them not having any background in the world other than, what they've seen. Have they seen Rebels or anything like that?
No, not really. I always float it by them when a new Star Wars thing comes out because I get excited. And like, if there's anything that is remotely geeky and I'm excited about it, I always try to like let them sample it, but I try not to be overbearing because as a parent, it's very easy to be like, why don't my kids like the things I like? Because they're awesome. And I go out of my way to not do that. But I also always want to give them like a taste of it if I think that it's age appropriate, because if they do like it, it's something we can do together. And so every like new Star Wars show or whatever, I always kind of like have them watch part of an episode and see if they're interested. And they just haven't latched on, which is totally fine.
Right. And the main reason I was asking about that one is that the fan community for Edge of the Empire, and I guess really for the Star Wars RPG itself, has made this one particular group, I think they call themselves Ranker Publishing, and they've put out a full hundreds of pages wide, professionally put together PDF of a Star Wars Rebels source book.
See, that's awesome. That's something that I would want to play on my own.
It's free. It's free. You can go download it. It's not for sale. It's one of those fan things that are made for RPGs all the time. I've got it downloaded. I'll if I remember tomorrow, I'll put a link into the show notes so that y'all can all go grab this. Like, it's great, and that's something that your kids might be able to get into if they've seen that show. But one of the things I wanted to talk about in terms of the story, and because they don't have that background, is like the second adventure. Like, I'm doing the beginner games come with a printed adventure, and then they each have a downloadable adventure that you can go that continues that one in further detail if you want to. And so that's what we're doing right now. We did the first act of 3 for the continuation of the beginner game, and the second act 2, looking through it, I didn't see, and there might be, but I didn't see combat. That it is entirely based on negotiation and wandering around doing espionage at a party.
That's interesting.
That is something that if your kids are looking at if you're looking at making it so that your kids aren't exposed to violence, this one is already built for that. You can limit the kinds of violence that they see, and there are examples out there of stories that you can tell that are entirely devoid of that. And as DM, as GM, as Game Master, you could write these stories or whatever you wanted to keep them within that area of the world and of Star Wars that you're familiar with and introduce it to them because it's so narrative based. So this, I think, is a good choice for that, because I didn't want me and Austin and Barry and anybody else who we may bring in to be rule lawyers. We didn't want to get rule whipped all the time. We want to do this to hang out because Barry and I are an hour and a half away, and Austin is like 17 away. It's like when we hang out, we want to have fun. We don't want to rule whip each other.
Yeah, well, and that's why I've kept my eye out for other systems too. So Powered by the Apocalypse is another one that's super interesting because it's so moddable, and the community has taken it and run with it, and there are so many resources if you want to do a Powered by the Apocalypse game and have some kind of spin on it or have a homebrew on top of it. That system is almost made for it. So there are tons and tons of Powered by the Apocalypse games out there that I've been interested in. The one that I'm kind of leaning towards right now is Monster of the Week, which is it's what they're playing on the Adventure Zone right now. So the Adventure Zone, after they wrapped up the Balance arc, which was D&D, they did a series of a few different mini arcs and then a one shot also. So they did 4 different systems if you include all of those. And they just wanted to feel out now that they know the kind of narrative structure that they like, which is a lot more narrative and a lot less combat and numbers and the kind of stuff that you and I are talking about avoiding.
Yeah.
They were we want to find a system or some kind of approach where we can get away from that and get more towards the narrative. And they landed on Monster of the Week, and I really, really like it because it has a little bit of dice rolling, it has a little bit of rules, but it's not heavy-handed. It's very much kind of what you were talking about, where there's failure or a mixed success or a full success. There's kind of 3 different levels of it, and that's about it. With, I think it's 2d6. I'd have to look it up again.
Oh wow, that's what it is. It's a 2d6 system.
Yeah, it's a 2d6. It's super, super simple. And that way you can weight a lot of it towards those middle results, just probability wise. But one of the interesting things about it that I like is that there's room in there to have that kind of back and forth between the GM and the player, where if they fail or they have a partial success, it's okay, well, you can do this, but this is going to happen, and you can kind of talk it out, which I think would be a good thing to do with kids, is to just kind of do a little bit of that narrative building together instead of just being the one that says this happens, as the GM.
Yeah.
The other thing that I really like about it is that it's very, very flexible about how you react to things. It has I'd have to look it up exactly, so I'm not going to go in depth into the rules, but it has very big umbrella things that you can do. So as the player, you don't have to worry about it. You can be I attack the monster with fire, or I throw a candle at the monster because I think it might be afraid of fire. And then, you as the GM can take one of these big umbrella things and tell them to roll and add their, X to it, which is, there's only a couple of them, but it's not stats on top of character stats on top of special powers on top of equipment and all of the math that goes into D&D, which I think would be a little bit overwhelming. And then the other reason that I like it is that there's no direct violence. Well, if you do Monster of the Week specifically, instead of, which is, I think it might actually, I don't remember what system it's on. It might be Powered by the Apocalypse, but I think that's wrong. I think it's something else. There wouldn't be any direct violence against human-like creatures. You could just do a a monster of the week. You know, it could be like a boogeyman or like a ghost or whatever. So it's something that's much more cartoony violence. So they can still have that interaction with like trying to defeat something, but they don't have to worry about like harming another humanoid, you know, whether that be orc or elf or whatever.
Yeah.
So I was leaning towards all those things. And something that's really cool about Monster of the Week that I like is that you only get experience when you fail. And that means that, and so it's something
That's awesome.
Initially I was like, that's kind of weird. But the more that I've listened to it now, right? Because they're like on their second or third arc in the Monster of the Week series that they're doing on the Adventure Zone, it's like, it makes it so that either you're succeeding and you feel good because you succeeded, or there's that mixed success where you're like, you succeed, but you have to take something. Like there's, you know, that kind of balance there. Or if you fail, it's like, yeah, something bad's going to happen, but you get experience, so you still feel good about it. So it's like, no matter the outcome, you're kind of getting something out of it. And I like that a lot. Instead of when you fail, you fail. You know, I think that might be good for kids.
And I'm looking it up as you're talking about this just to see, and you can buy it for like $12.
It's cheap.
The
so that's
PDF
kind of what
is $12, and even the book for it and digital is $25. I mean, it's very affordable for an RPG. And you talking about the D6 and the being able to fudge the numbers and stuff like that, is I realized that what I was talking about with those dice may have sounded a bit overcomplicated for what it actually is. There's actually a lot of online dice rollers for Star Wars, and there's an official Fantasy Flight app called Star Wars Dice that ties in, because they use this across multiple games that they've made for Star Wars, and it rolls it for you. It's $5, and it's been way worth it to be able to tap, 3 green, 1 yellow, and 4 purple, and it automatically tallies it up at the top of your screen based on your rolls. So it's like, okay, I ended up with 3 successes and a despair. I hate myself. And it's something, it's really, really good.
I wanted to pick your brain about that a little bit, because you told me about these apps, but also like, I mentioned to you to look into Roll20, because I've heard a lot of people who are doing like remote play like you're doing have had huge success with that, even though I know it's more geared towards like D&D and Pathfinder type of games. So like with Roll20, and then you ended up looking at Tabletop Simulator.
Yeah,
so
I ended up grabbing Tabletop Simulator because there wasn't really a demo of it that I could try like there are the others.
Yeah, so like what led you to that, and what do you want to do with it? I know you haven't had a chance yet, but like what's your intention there?
So I went out and I started looking for those because you told me about Roll20, and I wanted to know what to really use for this, and because we're doing it on Google Hangouts right now, and we're probably going to continue doing that, but I wanted something that I didn't have to. Our first game, Austin had physical maps, which is something else. This game only has a very minor amount of maps that we had.
Yeah, I definitely like theater of the mind for these type of games.
Yeah. There was a map to show you what the layout of one cave looked like, and my friends shot into the cave with a mind-controlled Trandoshan, and they didn't even go in it, so I never even pulled out the map. Because they never approached the cave. And so like I went to Roll20 and I looked, and Roll20 looks like it's a fantastic system. And apparently from the numbers that they have, about 6% of the games that they play are Star Wars RPG, but it's not officially supported. So everything, all of the rule sets are fan made or player made, and so you don't have that the ability to go officially buy the rule set to add in, and it's all based on an API for Roll20.
Which you can do some of that with like Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder, right? You can buy like official tie-ins.
Yep, you can just straight up buy them. There are like 6 of them on Roll20 that are official. D&D, Pathfinder, it looks like the 13th Age, Monty Cook Games, whatever they make, and Innies. And there's another one that they have that I can't remember exactly what it was called, what system it was, but it was they have a generic role-playing system, which is how people have adapted it into the Star Wars one. But I didn't want to have to deal with it, because a lot of the links I saw actually sent to GitHub to be able to get the scripts that you needed to run. And I was like, I'm learning a new RPG system. I'm not even worried about Lua scripts right now.
Yeah.
And so I went and looked at Fantasy Grounds, And Fantasy Grounds actually has a really good fan-made Star Wars thing too, because it's not officially supported on that one either, and it works okay. But then I saw a video, and I wish I could remember who did it. The guy's name is Shaq, is the name he goes by, but but I was looking them up, and when I was looking for actual play for Edge of the Empire, and I ran across this group on YouTube, and I had to look up and see what they were using because it looked so cool. Like, it was this 3D table that they had with all of the cards and minis, and it turns out it was Tabletop Simulator. There is a Tabletop Simulator table on the Steam Workshop that basically has everything already imported and made into it. That's a fan-made mod, and apparently everyone uses it. And because it's Tabletop Simulator, there are all sorts of little minis and models that people have made for all sorts of stuff that you can bring in from, like, they have reconstructed all of the stuff from, like, KOTOR and stuff like that on there that I've imported, and just have these movable, like, Dedrick characters and things like that, just everything. And so I'm going to end up using that, I think, as a way to, like, because my friends don't want to buy it, and they don't want to, as they said, we're on Hangouts, but they said they don't want to, like, stare at a screen, which is why they wanted to do tabletop. But I'm like, whatever, okay, cool. I can just screen share it on a second computer. That's not a big deal. And be like, okay, this is what we're doing, and show them and do it on there. Tabletop Simulator is the one that actually looks like it has the best support for Star Wars because of the way that the APIs and the mods and everything work. Because the Tabletop Simulator being so open, there was a much greater way of adding all of the rules and stuff in, because they've scripted the player sheets and everything on there.
Well, and
the
if
only
you have
thing
a
that's
VR
missing out of
headset,
there,
you can jump in there too, which I always thought was cool about Tabletop Simulator.
And I want that now. Like, I want to get a VR headset to do that because it's so cool. Because I'm really enjoying it. I haven't done that one yet, but I think that's the one I'm going to run on, even though it takes a lot more hardware to run and work with. It is by far a more robust system. I would love just to have Roll20 or something set up. If anybody wants to set up Roll20 for me and send me the all of it set up and put together with all the stuff doing automatically, I'll use it and I'll love you forever. But I just haven't had the time to put the entire thing together and make sure all the scripts are working and that kind of thing.
Sweet. Well, any parting thoughts on tabletop RPGs, where they're at right now?
I'm kind of super into this right now. I've been reading through what I can get my hands on. There's a website called Legends of the Galaxy, and I'll include links to this stuff in the show notes, where if you guys are interested in looking at it, you can, where there's a character generator, and they have the free PDFs of these source materials up there, and the ones that Fantasy Flight provides for free, that kind of thing. And you can read through them and see what's going on, and it's fantastic. Like, this has made me, because by the time you guys are listening to this, I'm going to be in Spain for a work retreat. And so I've just spent around 12 hours in an airplane trying to amuse myself between two strangers. And I'm loading up my phone with video games and podcasts, and I just subscribed to the Adventure Zone to give it a shot while I'm on the plane. And there's also a podcast for this one called Order 66 that I'm going to listen to, which is all about the Edge of the Empire RPG, which is a podcast about it, a meta podcast. I don't know how much of it they do with actual play, but apparently you can learn a lot about it from that one as well, and I'm going to. But, like, I'm super excited. Like, I can't wait. Like, I'm hoping we can bring more people in, or I would love to get another session of this going sometime if I could ever find time to be able to between podcasting and doing one tabletop session at night already, it's hard to fit that in, but I would love to get another one of these going because I'm really excited about it.
Sweet. Well, we should probably do a follow-up in like a few months or like a year and just see. I would love to know just kind of, and not necessarily like diving into the depths of your campaign, but just to follow up about like what you've learned about being a GM and like how it's going, that kind of thing in general. So we'll have to circle back around to it. Why don't we talk about the geeky offer of the week? tell the people about Patreon.
If you guys want to make it so that Void and I can afford RPG source books, then you can go to patreon.com/geek2geekcast and support the show. You can get all sorts of cool stuff, like, telling us what you want to hear on the podcast. You can pay for an ad, whatever it is. We have reward tiers set up there, but you don't have to worry about any of that. We just, if you like the show, just take a look at patreon.com.
If we get a new Patreon in the next week, I will go and buy the Monster of the Week source book and read it and report back. I will take that as homework.
Yes, do that. Challenge accepted.
Don't forget about the other stuff on the network either. Geekitude had a couple weeks ago when I didn't know what the mystery episode was. I wanted to highlight that because we're kind of out of time sync with this episode here. But they talked about Sony's use of Marvel characters, which was super, super interesting. I really liked that episode. That was the one where they accidentally did a contest at the end. And they said that they had so much fun, like seeing all the submissions, that they're probably going to do more contests going forward. So keep an eye on the Geekitude feed, or an ear on the Geekitude feed, I suppose. Tea Time with Katie and Chelsea, they did an episode about how to geek out, or like what to geek out about when your brain is just fried from stuff, which I know you and I talked about recently with like being overworked. So it was always cool to hear another perspective on that type of thing.
Absolutely.
With that, it's probably time for Weekly Geekery, where we share what we've been geeking out about. You've been geeking out about a lot of Star Wars based on this list.
Pretty much. Yeah, and so I canceled World of Warcraft. I still have about a month left on my subscription because I did a 3-month when I started, just because I knew I would be playing it that long, and that was about right, because by the time the next month goes out, I will have gotten through all of the content, all of the raid that's been put out, and I'll be fine. Like I'll have had fun. I'll have done Mythics and Mythic Plus and the raid, and it's been great. But it got to the point where last week I wasn't really engaged in logging in. I'd gotten my character up to the point where I could raid. I think it was level 342, and I just didn't want to play anymore. And it wasn't that it wasn't good and it wasn't fun. It was, I kind of hit that goal I'd set myself for getting raid ready, and I was like, okay, I achieved my goal. Like we had talked about before, where we kind of like trail off after that. That was my line this time, and I'm going to continue playing it. I'm going to continue doing my stuff, but this expansion feels now that they took the stuff I really did like out of Legion and water it down, and that stinks. That I don't like that part of it, and so it'll be fine. I'll play it for the next month and probably go back whenever the next raid tier is released and see all of that stuff, because I actually subscribed to Star Wars The Old Republic again, because I got into such a Star Wars mood because of, reading all of this stuff for Edge of the Empire, that it made me really jones for a really good Star Wars game. And I knew I had recently read that, I'm probably way behind on it anyway, but that there was another Old Republic expansion, like one of their digital expansions, that I'd missed coming out completely. So I had gone through about half of the Knights of the Fallen Empire story that they had done, which where they jumped 5 years ahead and completely made all new stuff that wasn't even based on anything in the normal Star Wars canon. And it's great. And so they finished out that narrative now with Knights of the Eternal Empire, or Knights of the Eternal Throne, excuse me. I decided to go back and try it, and it grabbed me. It made me realize, and I think it's because of how much I enjoyed the storytelling on WoW, that how much better BioWare does it. That this one feels more like the BioWare storytelling that I remember than the last couple of Old Republic digital expansions with Hutt Cartel and the Shadow of Revan. This one feels like the story I wanted to tell. Like, it's good. I care about these characters, and they finally kind of have a wrap on that. I know I was texting you about this today, that I haven't had to group with anybody I didn't want to. It feels like it's an MMO system, but they've made it where you can even solo instances. Like, they put in, you can use your companion, and they put out heals, like potions. I don't even know what they're called, kiosks, whatever, for you to click on to heal in boss fights and just around the dungeons. It's great for this. This afternoon, while I was my brain was hurting from working on some PHP that didn't want to work right, I went in and got into decorating my stronghold, and I didn't think I was going to like it, but holy cow, I do. And it's way better than it was the last time I played it, so I'm really excited about that right now.
That's good. Yeah, I keep thinking I might go back to it someday. It'll take something to get me there. I'm a ways away, I can tell, but
yeah.
There's something there that like I want that story. I just don't want the MMO-ness around it, which was kind of what you just said. Like, they keep paring down the MMO aspects and making it more single-player friendly. So at some point, we'll hit a tipping point, and I'll probably go back in. Yeah,
I mean, I think the next one that's coming out, it should be this fall, is what they've said. I think it may be called Scourge of the Jedi, but they're moving back to the Jedi versus Sith stuff. So that would be a good point to jump in, because that will be the latest iteration of what they've been doing with it. Right now, the next patch is like a PvP patch, so you'll hate that. But the next story patch will probably be in about a month and a half, 2 months. Because of that, I've been like really excited about that story, which is why I haven't played as much Spider-Man for the last episode, so that's why I wasn't as far as you were. But like I said, I've been reading the Star Wars RPG stuff. I'm listening to the Order 66 podcast whenever I'm flying, and I'm going to link to the Rebel source book and then Legends of the Galaxy in the show notes. I also loaded up my phone with games to play, and so I actually downloaded Galaxy of Heroes, the Star Wars game that you like so much, and it's not the game I thought it was. I had it mixed up with Force Arena.
It's just that every once in a while it gets its hooks in me and I can't put it down, but it's definitely like not a complicated game. It's just something where I can get some progression and interact with Star Wars a little bit.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I feel with it right now. It's like I'll be watching TV, like Woodwork, like I mentioned last week, and I'll have it on auto battle, and then I'll be leveling up my Luke Skywalker farm boy or something like that. It's neat. But I thought it was Force Arena. I thought it was the newer one they came out with that I didn't like. That was like this kind of weird tappy MOBA wannabe.
Yeah, I don't like that game either. That's not a good one.
Yeah, that's not a good one. So every time you've mentioned Galaxy of Heroes, I'm like, what's wrong with your brain? And everything was fine with your brain. And so I'm playing that like because I'm on an airplane game if I have Wi-Fi, and or I'm in my Airbnb and I need to be alone. So I'm like on my phone playing Galaxy of Heroes. Also, because of the trip, I downloaded on Prime. Apparently Prime has free books, and I didn't know it. Like, it's different than Kindle Unlimited. Like, you actually have Prime Reading. The Ahsoka novel is actually on Prime Reading, and because Austin was talking about how great it was, you've talked about how great it was, and I'm in a Star Wars mood, I decided to start it, and it's really good. That I'm maybe 45% into it, and you know, I knew I loved Ahsoka as a character because of the end of Clone Wars and what I've seen of her in Rebels, and this just solidifies that she is one of my all-time favorite Star Wars characters now, and she was the reason I didn't watch Clone Wars in the beginning, because she was annoying, and the way that they've actually gave a progression to that character and real depth over the years and through all these different media, I'm amazed, and really want to reiterate to everyone else that if you are thinking about reading it, read it, because it's really good. You can go to audibletrial.com/geek-to-geek, or is it audibletrial.com/geek, and get it for free.
There you go. Yeah,
see what I did?
That.
But it's really good. I've been listening to the audiobook with Whisper Sync because I actually have it on audio, and it's awesome. Like, it's great. I'm really excited about it.
Ahsoka is probably my favorite Star Wars character at this point. That, like, canon Star Wars character, I should say. There are other ones that are interesting that are outside of canon these days. But yeah, it's cool that you got back into Star Wars, especially because you had like bounced off of it. And I didn't realize till we talked this week that you basically bounced off of it when like the fan backlash happened against The Last Jedi. And like, I just don't let things like that get to me. Like, I'll read a little bit of the criticism because I'm always curious, and then I'll move on with my day. But I don't I try really hard to not let like what other people like or dislike affect what I'm enjoying. So I didn't realize that it had like such an effect on you.
And I realized what it was. After you and I had that talk, I realized why it affected me so much. And it wasn't the actual backlash. It was any time I went out to look for Star Wars stuff, when I wanted to read an article or see something or whatever it was, anytime I wanted to interact with what I loved, that was there. That was at the top. That's what I saw. That's what people were talking about. That's where the comments were, no matter what it was. And that really destroyed me on that, because I'm such a community person that if that's where that community and fandom was going, I wanted no part of it. And I'm finally able to move beyond that because I found cool stuff with people I love.
That's good. Yeah. I didn't do a ton this week because we're pre-recording, and so we stretched our weekly Geekery over 2 weeks. But I'm sure I'm still playing Spider-Man in real time somewhere out there. I did watch a couple more movies. Like I said, I was going to dive into like the World War II stuff, after I wrapped up World War I.
Yep.
So I watched Saving Private Ryan and Enemy at the Gates, and both of them are still really good movies.
Yep.
I also went back and I kind of forced myself to get through the Pacific, and there were a couple episodes in there that were really slow, which is when I stopped all 3 times that I tried to watch it. Yeah. So after I got past those episodes, it got good again. So I'm glad that I finished it.
Great.
Well, good being a relative term. I mean, it's like a horrific battle, but it's
but it is.
It's well made. It's well produced.
Yes, thank you.
It
well
was
made.
worth
That
my
was the
time.
word.
Yeah, so I'm glad that I watched it. I don't see Band of Brothers, like the original one. I can see myself going back to that and rewatching it every few years for the rest of my life. I don't think I would do that with the Pacific because, well, there's a lot of reasons, but I'm glad that I watched it anyway. I also watched Ocean's 8, which is totally unrelated to World War II, but I got around to it
so
because
much
it came
fun.
out. I didn't like it that much.
Really?
It wasn't bad. It's just that like I hold it up to Ocean's 11 in my head and it just doesn't measure up. Like Ocean's 11 is so good, but that being said, I feel the same way about the Ocean's 11 sequels. Like Ocean's 12, yes. I didn't really like, and Ocean's 13 is better, but still not as good as Ocean's 11. So
yep, exactly.
When you're comparing it against that, for me, it probably falls kind of in the realm of like Ocean, somewhere between 12 and 13 for me, 12 being the worst and 13 being second from the bottom.
See, and I think 8 is actually better than 13.
I could see that argument. Like I could definitely like entertain that argument. It just depends on your taste,
Yeah, it does. I think it just will depend on what characters you like seeing and who it is, like, and even just the story and what hits you at the time. Like, but it is good. I liked it. I liked it a lot, and I want to see it again.
Yeah, I thought it was okay. I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it. It was very like, okay, I'm glad I watched it once. I probably don't need to watch that again. I did try the Mega Man 11 demo this week, and it's interesting. It feels like they're trying to bridge the gap between classic Mega Man and Mega Man X, and it leans towards the classic side. And so I'm glad I played the demo because I know I'm not going to buy the game because like I just don't like classic Mega Man. I like Mega Man X. So if they ever take the X series and bring that back and move it forward, I'm going to be so excited. But it seems like they've just been letting it sit there for years and years. My favorite Mega Man game of all time is Mega Man X, like that original one.
It's so good. Like it is. It's the best one.
Yeah. So it's interesting though. If you do like both of them, both series, or if you just like classic Mega Man, I think you will probably really like Mega Man 11. So definitely go try out the demo. I know it's free on Switch. I don't know if it's out on other systems, but there's a demo out there.
That's awesome. I was going to ask what system it was on because I've seen people talking about it, but I've been so in I want to say SWOTOR, but I think it sounds so dumb, and Spider-Man that I haven't even looked to see what platforms the demo is on, but I have heard it's really hard, like really Mega Man frustrating.
It is. Well, they have like there's a new system that's called this dual gear system. So you can like trigger them and they have a meter that goes down, but then automatically recharges when you're not using it. And one of them slows down time. So it gives you a lot of time to react to things. And then the other one powers you up. And I think you're really intended to use those throughout the game. Like they're not there to be, like help for babies. Like it's really there as part of the game, and if you're not using them, then you're doing yourself a disservice and it's extra hard. So there's probably new stuff there for people to get their head around, and I just don't think they have yet.
Yeah, I can totally see that if there are those systems around, because I've heard that it is controller throwing hard.
Yeah, it was difficult, but I mean, I beat it. It wasn't impossible or anything. It was just difficult. The one thing that I played a lot of before Spider-Man came out, and I'll probably get back to after Spider-Man is done too, is Lord of the Rings, the LCG, the digital version, finally came out.
Steam,
I've been
right?
waiting for this. Yeah, it's on Steam. It's in early access on Steam right now, and I bought into it because like I love that card game, but I never have the time to get it on the table, and it's always been so long between each play session that I can't remember the rules all the way, and I have to look them up. And it's just like there's this huge barrier of entry there. So I'm really glad that it's out digitally now, and I can just play it. And it's not the same game. It's an adaptation. They simplified it in a lot of ways, but they kept the core of it. So like the interesting things that I really liked are there, but some of the extra complexities are not there. And then it's digital, so they're doing things that you can only do in digital games, you know? Like it's just a bunch of little stuff that really adds up. So I like it a lot. I ended up buying every single one of the card packs so that I could make a couple different decks and mess around with it. And even though I bought all the card packs, in total, I probably paid less than $20. It was like $7 to get into early access, and then like $1 or $2 per pack, and there are only like 3 or 4 packs out right now. So it's not a whole lot of money. There's only one quest set right now, so I think there's like 5 different quests in it, so it's like one kind of storyline. But that's another thing, is that the whole thing is PvE, and co-op is going to get added later. I mean, it's early access, so it's not there yet, and that was a big part of the draw of the game, was playing co-op. But the fact that it's all PvE means that they can do things that other card games can't. And it feels like every other digital card game out there is PvP. And because it's against the computer and the environment, it can be asymmetrical. You know, it doesn't have to be balanced. And that makes for very interesting things that you don't see in other games. So I really want them to just start putting out more quests so I can see a variety of other things and I can start picking up more card packs. In general, I'm just excited for the game.
And it's Fantasy Flight as well, that it's one of the LCGs we've talked about on here at length at different points, where you don't have to actually collect any different cards, that you're not doing it like Hearthstone where you get random cards in a pack, that when you buy these card packs that he's talking about, you get the cards, that those are in your collection, those are the cards that exist. There's no RNG on it, there's no randomness. You get it, you have the set, you can make what you want.
Yeah, and it's that transferred over to a digital version for like the first time ever. So I'm all about supporting it. I'll keep my eye on it. It depends how long it's in early access and how slow or fast they roll out the content. I mean, I basically beat all the content that's there. I want to kind of go through the whole content again because I had so much fun, but then I'll probably let it sit until they start pushing out new versions and new content and stuff.
Yeah. Can you alter this one into like hard modes that like you could
that's one of the other things. There's different difficulty settings too, because it's PvE. Like it doesn't have to be balanced, you know? Like it can be balanced for you as the player. And there are scores too, which is something that's a holdover from the tabletop game, where like you can always play on easy if you want, or you can play on like the hardest difficulty, but you can keep trying to improve your score. And you can actually get like in-game rewards for getting higher scores, which is pretty cool. Like you can get some of the in-game currency bonus on top of what you would normally get if you can score high, you know? So like keep your hero's health up, or don't let any of your heroes get eliminated, or finish the game with less threat than a certain amount, stuff like that.
That's awesome. That's a really good incentive to keep people playing it, because the LCG is fun because of that, especially the co-op. I've only played it the once with the co-op being what I played. I've never played it solo, but I know you and Austin both have, because he has the initial beginner set and loves it. Like both of you guys love it. So this one is exciting me to see what it is, and I look forward to the co-op. That when it gets implemented, I will buy this.
Yeah, it's fairly cheap to buy in right now. I hope it stays that way, but I mean, if you're at all interested, I think it'll probably be free to play in the end, honestly, when it launches. But like, if you are interested enough, based on what I said, it's only like $8 to buy your way into the lowest level of early access, and honestly, that's all you need. Like, they have packs that go all the way up to like $70 or something, and you're just throwing your money away at that point. You don't need to do that. You can just buy your way in for $8 and have fun.
Yeah, that sounds much better.
Yep. That's probably it for this week. BJ will be back from Spain, hopefully, next week, as
Barcelona.
long as, planes work. And then we'll talk about probably travel, I would bet.
Hopefully
after
I'm
you're
not
back.
dead.
Yeah, that's the hope. that's all we got for this week. You can write to us with comments, suggestions, or feedback. Our email address is geek2geekcast@gmail.com, or reach us on Twitter @geek2geekcast. We also have longer discussion threads on our subreddit at reddit.com/r/geek2geekcast.
And we also have great discussions on Slack and Discord. You can go to discord.geek2geekcast.com or slack.geek2geekcast.com and hang out with us. And remember, like we said earlier, we're part of a network, so you can go listen to any of our podcasts at geek2geekcast.com.
I blog at agreenmushroom.com, and you could find me at grnmushroom. That's green mushroom without the E's on Twitter.
And I'm on Twitter as @Professor Beej. That's Beej with 2 E's, and I blog at geekfitness.net.
We've been Void and Beej with your Geek to Geek podcast. That'll do it for this week. See you next week, geeks.
Adios, amigos.
Hi everyone, I'm Katie.
And I'm Chelsea, and we are the hosts of Tea Time with Katie and Chelsea. We are 2 best friends who love pop culture and talking about pretty much whatever we want. Katie!
Yes?
Stop thinking about Zac Efron and tell our future listeners what some of our latest episodes have been about.
Well, we've talked about Zac Efron.
No, get it together, Katie.
Fine. We've talked about fan fiction, classical literature adaptations, favorite TV couples, and so much more. So grab your cup of tea or whatever your drink of choice is and download our podcast today.
Hi, my name is Joe Hogan, and I'm a geek. And if you're currently listening to this, there's a good chance you're a geek too. So check out my podcast, Geektitude. Each week, I talk with somebody about their geek aptitude. Sometimes I talk to people in a geeky profession. Sometimes it's someone doing something really cool with their geekiness. Often it's another geeky podcaster. But it's always someone who wants to share their inner geek. So join me each week as we come together to geek out about all the geeky stuff we love. And remember, this week, keep it geek.